The bright lights of the Galactic Trade Center reflected off Lady Anna's silvery skin as she walked through the bustling halls. Her tall, elegant frame and flowing robes marked her as one of the elite Celestials, beings who had mastered space travel millennia before Earth was even discovered. "My lady, the human merchandise is this way." Her assistant gestured toward a quieter section of the massive complex. Anna nodded, her crystalline eyes narrowing slightly. She had researched humans extensively before making this trip. Their species was fascinating. Primitive by celestial standards, yet remarkably resilient and adaptable. The holding area was clean and well-maintained, but Anna could sense the underlying tension. Humans lined the viewing areas, each standing in their designated spaces. Some looked defeated, others defiant. Her gaze swept over them analytically until she spotted him. He stood perfectly still, but not in the cowering way of someone broken. His posture spoke of military training, and his eyes, a striking blue, met hers without fear. The information panel beside him flickered to life as she approached. Speci men, human male, name, James, AG, 28 Earth years, plurivarious occupation, military officer, skills, combat training, strategy, leadership, health, excellent, pluric, 50,000 credits. "This one," Anna said firmly, pointing to James. The trader, a Rotan being named Mork, hurried over with an eager smile. "Excellent choice, my lady. This specimen is one of our finest, captured during a routine survey mission. His military background makes him perfect for security duties, and humans are known for their loyalty once properly trained." Anna watched as James's jaw tightened slightly at the word trained. Interesting. Most species would have looked away, but he maintained his composed demeanor. "I'll take him," she declared. "Have him processed and delivered to my residence by evening." The paperwork was handled quickly. Being a high counselor had its advantages. As Anna turned to leave, she caught James studying her with an unreadable expression. Most servants wouldn't dare make eye contact with a Celestial, let alone a counselor. This human's boldness was either going to make him an excellent addition to her household or a serious problem. Later that evening, James arrived at Anna's massive estate in the floating cities of Celestia. He wore the simple gray uniform of household staff, but somehow managed to make it look like a military dress uniform through his bearing alone. "Your duties will include maintaining the security of my residence, attending me at public functions, and managing my daily schedule," Anna informed him, watching for his reaction. "You will have private quarters in the staff wing and one rest day per standard week. Do you understand?" "Yes, my lady," James replied, his voice deep and clear. There was no tremor of fear, no excessive submission in his tone, just calm acknowledgement. Anna circled him slowly, noting his perfect posture and controlled breathing. "You're different from the others I've seen. Most humans display either fear or obvious hatred when purchased. Would either reaction change my situation, my lady?" James asked, a hint of something, perhaps dry humor, in his voice. Anna stopped in front of him, surprised by his response. "No, I suppose not. But it might make your life more difficult. I prefer to deal with reality as it is, not as I wish it to be," he replied. For a moment, Anna felt a strange flutter in her chest, something she hadn't experienced in centuries. This human was intriguing. She quickly pushed the feeling aside. "Report to the security office for your briefing. You begin your duties tomorrow at dawn," she ordered, turning away to hide her momentary confusion. As James left the room with measured steps, Anna found herself wondering if she had made a mistake. She had wanted a servant, not a puzzle to solve, but something told her that James was going to be far more than either of those things. Little did she know, this purchase would set in motion events that would change not only her life, but the entire relationship between humans and Celestials forever. 2 weeks had passed since James's arrival, and Lady Anna found herself increasingly frustrated. Not because he was incompetent, quite the opposite. He performed his duties with perfect efficiency, but there was always something in his manner that suggested he was humoring her rather than serving her. "The security protocols you requested have been implemented," James reported one morning, standing in her private study. "I've also taken the liberty of adding several improvements." Anna looked up from her data screens, frowning. "Improvements? I don't recall authorizing any changes to my original specifications." "The existing protocols had gaps," James explained calmly. "The new measures protect against methods commonly used by Earth's military special forces. Since humans are now part of the galactic community, it seemed prudent to account for our tactics." She wanted to be angry at his presumption, but his logic was sound. That was the problem. He was always right in the most irritating way possible. "You overstep your position," she said coolly. "A servant does not make decisions without consulting their owner." James's blue eyes met hers steadily. "With respect, my lady, you purchased a military officer with extensive security experience. It would be wasteful not to utilize that expertise." Anna rose from her desk, her silvery skin shimming with barely contained annoyance. "I purchased a servant, human. Do not forget that." "I haven't forgotten anything, my lady," he replied, his tone perfectly respectful while somehow managing to convey that he considered the whole concept of ownership ridiculous. Before Anna could respond, her communication panel chimed. A fellow counselor's face appeared, looking concerned. "Anna, there's been an incident at the Central Archives. We need your immediate presence." "I'll be there shortly," she replied, already moving toward the door. "James, prepare my transport." The journey to the archives was tense. Anna noticed James scanning their surroundings constantly, his military training evident in every movement. When they arrived, she was surprised to find the situation already under control. "What happened?" she demanded of the archive's chief administrator. "A attempted data theft, my lady. But your servant, he somehow detected the intrusion before our systems did. He alerted our security team and suggested a containment strategy that prevented any loss of information." Anna turned to James, who stood quietly behind her. "Explain." "The attack pattern matched one I'd studied in my military days," he said simply. "I recognized the signs and acted accordingly." Later that evening, back at her estate, Anna paced in her private chambers. James stood at attention, waiting to be dismissed. "You made me look uninformed today," she said finally. "You should have told me what you suspected before acting." "There wasn't time," he replied. "And you wouldn't have believed me without proof." "You don't know that." "Don't I?" His question hung in the air between them. "In the 2 weeks I've been here, you've dismissed 70% of my suggestions simply because they came from a human." Anna stopped pacing. "You've been keeping count." "Humans have excellent pattern recognition skills," he said, the faintest hint of a smile touching his lips. "It's one of our more useful traits." She found herself fighting back an unexpected laugh. "You are the most infuriating servant I've ever owned." "Thank you, my lady," he replied, and this time the smile was definitely there. "That wasn't a compliment. From a celestial to a human, I'll take what I can get." Anna waved her hand in dismissal, not trusting herself to respond. As James left, she caught her reflection in a nearby mirror and was startled to see herself smiling. She quickly composed her features, but the damage was done. For the first time in centuries, someone had made her smile without intending to gain her favor. It was unsettling. More unsettling still was the realization that she was starting to look forward to their daily clashes of will. "This is becoming a problem," she muttered to herself. But deep down, she wasn't sure if she wanted to solve it. The grand reception hall of Celestia sparkled like a sea of stars, filled with the galaxy's most powerful beings. Lady Anna moved through the crowd with practiced grace, James following 3 steps behind as protocol demanded. She could sense his heightened alertness despite his calm exterior. "Lady Anna," a smooth voice called out. "How delightful to see you." Counselor Dex approached, his chrome-colored robe swirling around him. Anna noticed James shift slightly, positioning himself for a better view of the room. "Counselor," Anna replied with a polite nod. She had never trusted Dex. His political maneuvers too often worked against her initiatives, especially those involving human rights. "I see you still keep your human pet close," Dex said, his silver eyes flicking dismissively toward James. "How quaint." Before Anna could respond, James's hand suddenly gripped her shoulder, pulling her backward. In the same fluid motion, he stepped in front of her. A bright energy beam cut through the space where she had been standing, leaving a smoking hole in the marble floor. "Everyone down." James's voice carried across the hall with commanding authority. He had already spotted the assassin, a shadowy figure on the upper balcony. The gathering erupted into chaos. Security drones activated, but they moved too slowly, their programming unable to cope with the rapidly changing situation. The assassin fired again, but James had already calculated their pattern. "My lady, move with me," he ordered, all pretense of servitude gone. His hand stayed firmly on her arm as he guided her through the panicking crowd, using his body as a shield. The assassin jumped down, revealing themselves to be a shade, a species known for their chameleon-like abilities. They aimed another shot, but James was faster. He grabbed a decorative metal plate from a nearby table and threw it with precise force. It struck the assassin's weapon, sending their shot wide. "Stay here," James commanded, pushing Anna behind a massive column. Before she could protest, he was moving, using the chaos to his advantage. She watched in amazement as he navigated the room like a dance, each movement purposeful and precise. The shade was good, but James was better. He anticipated their moves, herding them away from the crowds and into a corner. When the assassin tried to use their chameleonic abilities to blend with the walls, James didn't hesitate. He grabbed a pitcher of brightly colored liquid from an overturned table and threw it, revealing the shade's outline. Security forces finally arrived, but James had already subdued the assassin. He had them pinned, using pressure points that apparently worked on their species just as well as on humans. The entire incident had lasted less than 5 minutes. Later, in her private chambers, Anna watched James as he gave his report to the Security Council. His uniform was torn, and a shallow cut on his cheek leaked red blood, so strange compared to her own silver ichor. "How did you know?" she asked when they were alone. "About the assassin. Several things felt wrong," he explained. Counselor Dex's arrival was too perfectly timed. The security drones were slower than usual, suggesting tampering, and there was a slight distortion in the air near the balcony. A shade's camouflage isn't perfect when they move. "You noticed all that in seconds." "It's what I was trained for," he said simply. Then, with a hint of his usual dry humor, he added, "And protecting my owner is part of my duties, isn't it?" Anna stepped closer to him, examining the cut on his cheek. "You could have died." "Yes. Why risk your life for someone who owns you?" James looked at her directly, his blue eyes intense. "You don't own me, Anna. No one does. I protected you because it was the right thing to do, and because—" he paused, something flickering in his expression, "because you're worth protecting." Anna felt that strange flutter in her chest again, stronger this time. Before she could respond, James straightened and resumed his formal posture. "If you'll excuse me, my lady, I should help coordinate with security about improving protocols." As he left, Anna touched her own cheek, remembering how his skin had looked in the chaos, flushed with exertion, alive in a way her own species never was. For the first time, she wondered if perhaps humans weren't primitive at all. Perhaps they were something else entirely. The night cycle of Celestia cast soft blue shadows through Anna's study as she reviewed reports from the assassination attempt. Her fingers paused over a particular detail about the modified security drones. "James," she called out, knowing he was still on duty. He appeared within moments, as always. "Yes, my lady." These security modifications, they're similar to what you implemented here. The assassin must have studied our systems. James moved closer to examine the data. Anna noticed how he unconsciously stood at parade rest, hands clasped behind his back. Not exactly, he said. They tried to copy our improvements, but missed crucial details. It's why their tampering was detectable. You sound almost pleased about that, Anna observed. Military habit. Always good to know your enemy's limitations. He glanced at her. You should rest, my lady. It's well past midnight. There's too much to analyze, she said, rubbing her temples. To her surprise, James pulled up a chair and sat down, something he had never done before in her presence. Then let me help. I have experience with threat assessment. Anna started to remind him of his place, but stopped herself. The assassination attempt had changed things between them, though she wasn't quite ready to admit how much. As they worked through the reports together, she found herself impressed by his analytical skills. He didn't just understand tactics, he grasped the political implications behind each piece of evidence. Dex isn't working alone, James said finally. The attack pattern suggests multiple influential supporters. How can you be sure? The resources required, the timing, the inside information needed. He leaned forward, his expression intense. On Earth, I specialized in identifying conspiracy patterns. This has all the markers. Anna studied him thoughtfully. You never mentioned this specialty before. You never asked. There was no accusation in his tone, just simple truth. Humans are taught to believe in our abilities, regardless of what others think of us. That sounds lonely, Anna said softly, surprising herself with the observation. James looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since the assassination attempt. Isn't it lonely at the top of celestial society, too? The question caught her off guard. Celestials weren't supposed to admit to such weaknesses, especially not to their servants. But in the quiet of the night, with danger still lurking in the shadows, old rules seemed less important. Yes, she admitted. It is. A comfortable silence fell between them. Anna found herself noticing things she'd been trying to ignore, the intelligence in his eyes, the strength in his hands as he sorted through data tablets, the way he seemed completely at ease despite their different social positions. Tell me about Earth, she said suddenly. Not the official reports. Tell me what it's really like. James's face softened with memory. It's chaotic, messy, beautiful. We haven't mastered space like your people, but we've learned to find joy in imperfection. We dance in the rain. We climb mountains just because they're there. We create art that serves no purpose except to move people's hearts. That sounds. Anna searched for the right word. Fascinating. Would you like to see? He pulled out a small device, an Earth phone he'd been allowed to keep. The images he showed her were stunning. Sunsets painting skies in colors she'd never imagined, cities that blended ancient stone with gleaming steel, people of all types laughing together. Your world is so alive, she whispered. So are its people, James replied quietly, looking at her in a way that made her feel more alive too. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Then the morning chimes sounded, breaking the spell. James stood smoothly, returning to his formal posture. You should rest now, my lady. Tomorrow will bring new challenges. As he turned to leave, Anna called out, James, thank you for sharing your world with me. He smiled, a real smile, not his usual careful one. Thank you for wanting to see it. After he left, Anna sat in her study for a long time, thinking about art that served no purpose except to move hearts, and wondering if perhaps she was beginning to understand what that meant. The morning light had barely touched Celestia's floating towers when James intercepted an encrypted transmission meant for Lady Anna's private terminal. His military training screamed that something was wrong about its signature. My lady, he called through the intercom. You need to see this. Anna appeared moments later, her silver skin shimmering with concern. What did you find? A message claiming to have evidence of, he hesitated, inappropriate relations between you and your human servant. Anna's crystalline eyes widened slightly. Blackmail. Not exactly. James brought up the decoded message. It's meant to look like blackmail, but it's really a trap. They want you to react defensively, to publicly distance yourself from humans. It would undermine your credibility in the upcoming rights debate. How can you be so sure? Because there is no evidence, he said simply. We've done nothing inappropriate, but a formal denial would make it seem like we had. Anna paced the room, her robes swirling around her. Dex. This has his style written all over it. Yes, but he's just a puppet. James pulled up several data streams he'd been monitoring. Look at these patterns. Multiple council members have been receiving similar threats, all targeting those who support human rights. You've been tracking council communications? Anna asked, torn between shock and admiration. Only the suspicious ones. His lips quirked. Being underestimated has its advantages. Before Anna could respond, her security alert chimed. A group of council enforcers was approaching her estate. Right on schedule, James muttered. They'll have a warrant to search for evidence of corrupting influences in your household. How long have you known this was coming? 3 days. I needed proof before bringing it to you. He met her gaze steadily. And I needed to be sure you'd trust me enough to listen. The sound of official vehicles landing outside made them both turn. Anna squared her shoulders, ready to face the intrusion, but James held up his hand. Wait, watch this. He pressed a sequence on his datapad. Suddenly, every screen in the house lit up with intercepted communications, messages between Dex and a group called the Purity Coalition, planning not just the discreditation of human rights supporters, but the systematic oppression of all lesser species. The enforcers will find this evidence instead of what they're looking for, James explained. I've been building this file since the assassination attempt. The timing of their search warrant gives us the perfect opportunity to expose everything. Anna stared at him in amazement. You orchestrated this entire counter-operation by yourself. Not entirely. Some of your loyal staff helped. The ones who've seen how you've changed, how you treat us all with growing respect. His eyes softened. They believe in you, Anna. So do I. The sound of enforcers at her door brought reality crashing back. But now Anna stood straighter, confident in their plan. My lady, James said quietly, resuming his servant pose as footsteps approached. Whatever happens, remember, this was my choice. All of it. Anna felt something twist in her chest at his words. This brilliant, careful man had risked everything to protect not just her, but the hope of a better future for his people. And he'd done it while playing the role of a simple servant. The doors slid open, revealing stern-faced enforcers. Lady Anna, we have a warrant. Of course, she interrupted smoothly. James, please assist our guests in accessing all household records. James bowed slightly, the perfect image of a dutiful servant. But as he led the enforcers, the great council chamber hummed with tension as Lady Anna stood before her peers. The evidence James had uncovered played on massive screens behind her, exposing the Purity Coalition's plots in devastating detail. Fellow council members, her voice rang clear across the chamber. We stand at a crossroads. The attempted assassination, the blackmail, the corruption, all of it stems from one source: our refusal to acknowledge the equality of other species. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Near the back, James stood with other servants, his presence both a challenge and a symbol. He had insisted on being there, despite the risk. A human uncovered this conspiracy, Anna continued. A human who was officially my servant, but whose intelligence and integrity exceeded that of many in this chamber. She looked directly at Dex, who sat rigid with fury. While some of us plotted to maintain outdated hierarchies, he worked to protect not just me, but our entire society from corruption. This is outrageous. Dex shot to his feet. You speak of a mere human as if he were my equal. Anna's voice cut through his protest. He is. They all are. And deep down, that's what terrifies you, isn't it? Not that humans are inferior, but that they might be our equals, or in some ways, our betters. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some council members shouted in protest, while others stood in support. In the confusion, Anna noticed James moving quietly through the crowd, his eyes scanning for threats. Order. The High Speaker's voice boomed across the chamber. Lady Anna, you realize the implications of your words. To suggest equality with humans. The great council chamber hummed with tension as Lady Anna stood before her peers. The evidence James had uncovered played on massive screens behind her, exposing the Purity Coalition's plots in devastating detail. Fellow council members, her voice rang clear across the chamber. We stand at a crossroads. The attempted assassination, the blackmail, the corruption, all of it stems from one source: our refusal to acknowledge the equality of other species. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Near the back, James stood with other servants, his presence both a challenge and a symbol. He had insisted on being there, despite the risk. A human uncovered this conspiracy, Anna continued. A human who was officially my servant, but whose intelligence and integrity exceeded that of many in this chamber. She looked directly at Dex, who sat rigid with fury. While some of us plotted to maintain outdated hierarchies, he worked to protect not just me, but our entire society from corruption. This is outrageous. Dex shot to his feet. You speak of a mere human as if he were my equal. Anna's voice cut through his protest. He is. They all are. And deep down, that's what terrifies you, isn't it? Not that humans are inferior, but that they might be our equals, or in some ways, our betters. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some council members shouted in protest, while others stood in support. In the confusion, Anna noticed James moving quietly through the crowd, his eyes scanning for threats. Order. The High Speaker's voice boomed across the chamber. Lady Anna, you realize the implications of your words. To suggest equality with humans, it goes against centuries of tradition. Traditions change, Anna replied firmly. They must, or we stagnate. Look at what humans have achieved in their brief time among the stars. Look at what one human achieved here, exposing corruption that our most sophisticated systems missed. She gestured to the evidence still playing behind her. The Purity Coalition didn't fear humans because they were weak. They feared them because they recognized their potential. And instead of embracing that potential, they chose to suppress it. From his position, James watched Anna with quiet pride. She had changed so much from the cold, status-conscious celestial who had purchased him months ago. Or perhaps she had always had this strength within her, waiting for the right catalyst to bring it forth. I move for an immediate vote, Anna declared, not just on the punishment of the conspirators, but on the full recognition of human rights and citizenship within our society. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Such a vote would be unprecedented. You can't be serious, Dex sputtered. Your relationship with this human has clearly compromised your judgment. Anna's eyes flashed dangerously. My relationship with James has opened my eyes, as has your conspiracy against me. You sought to shame me for growing close to a human. Instead, you've shown everyone exactly why such connections should be celebrated, not condemned. The High Speaker raised his hand for silence. A vote of this magnitude requires careful consideration. With respect, Anna interrupted. We've had centuries to consider it. How much longer should we wait while talent and potential go to waste? How many more conspiracies must we endure before we acknowledge the obvious? She turned to address the entire chamber. I stand before you not just as a counselor, but as someone who has seen firsthand the cost of our prejudice. And I am not alone. Around the chamber, other council members began to stand. Those who had worked with humans, who had seen their capabilities, who had maybe even formed their own forbidden friendships. James felt his chest tighten with emotion. This was more than he had ever dreamed possible when he had first walked into the Galactic Trade Center as merchandise. Now he stood in the heart of celestial power, watching centuries of discrimination begin to crumble. Anna caught his eye across the chamber, and in that moment, they both knew. Whatever the outcome of the vote, nothing would ever be the same. The walls between their species were falling, and with them, the barriers between two hearts that had found each other across the stars.